Through the Strait of Hormuz passes nearly half of China's oil supply, roughly 70% of South Korea's, and nearly all of Japan's. Since early 2026, that passage has been under the most severe disruption in its history. And the world's entire bypass infrastructure, every pipeline ever built to get around it, covers barely a quarter of what normally flows through. The canals that could replace it are still drawings. The railways can't carry oil at this scale. But there is one corridor, 116 kilometers long, that could change that completely. The UAE holds a geographic position no other Gulf oil producer can match. Kuwait, Iraq and Qatar sit entirely within the Persian Gulf. No Indian Ocean access, no practical way to route oil around the strait without crossing another country. Saudi Arabia's nearest coastline lies nearly 750 miles from its Gulf oil fields, making any bypass a much bigger, much harder project. The UAE is different. Its oil production sits on the Persian Gulf side, and it controls sovereign territory on the Gulf of Oman through Fujairah, with just 72 miles of land between them. The land between those two coastlines and its shortest crossing from Port Khalid in Sharjah to the port of Fujairah is mostly flat desert transitioning into the Hajar Mountains. Peaks above 5,900 feet, composed of ophiolite rock, dense and uneven formations riddled with geological fault lines, before dropping sharply to the Gulf of Oman coast. And the proof that this corridor works is already running. The Abu Dhabi crude oil pipeline, known as ADCOP, stretches roughly 235 to 250 miles from the Habshan oil fields to Fujairah. Completed in 2012 at a cost estimated between $3.3 and $4.2 billion, it was designed from day one to move oil outside the strait's reach. It has a nameplate capacity of 1.5 million barrels per day, with a design ceiling of 1.8 million, and every barrel it moves is beyond Iran's reach. ADCOP takes the longer southern route through Abu Dhabi. The direct 72-mile Sharjah to Fujairah crossing is shorter, more direct, and it remains entirely undeveloped. Fujairah itself is the world's third largest bunkering port by volume, with massive oil storage and direct access to Indian Ocean shipping lanes heading east toward India, South Korea, Japan, and China. Since the crisis began, it has become the most critical logistics node in the global energy system. Oil that was destined for Hormuz transit is being redirected through the Habshan pipeline wherever infrastructure permits. Tankers that can still operate are routing directly to Fujairah. Drone strikes already hit the Fujairah oil terminal in March 2026, confirming that bypass routes are now the frontline targets, not peacetime contingencies. The math scales from 1 pipeline to 10. A single 48-inch pipeline across the corridor moves roughly 2 million barrels per day at a cost of $4 to $6 billion. At a second, and capacity doubles to 4 million barrels per day for a combined $8 to $10 billion. 4 pipelines deliver 8 million barrels per day. 10 parallel pipelines reach full Hormuz replacement at a total system cost between $40 and $60 billion. Compare that to the canal proposals. An inland maritime canal through the same corridor carries a cost estimate of $70 to $100 billion and a construction timeline of 10 to 15 years under standard conditions. A wider canal concept routed directly through the Hajar Mountains comes in well above $200 billion. 10 pipelines cost less than any canal proposal, and the approach has one quality no canal can match. Each pipeline that goes online immediately starts delivering capacity. The full system does not need to finish before the first barrel moves. A canal is all or nothing. Pipelines deliver from the moment the first line opens. Even completing just the first 2 pipelines, achievable within roughly 4 to 5 years under accelerated timelines, would already represent more bypass capacity than the combined Saudi and UAE pipeline network was delivering before the crisis. One detail worth flagging. These pipelines carry crude oil only. Refined products like diesel, jet fuel, and liquefied natural gas have no bypass at all, a separate and significant problem for another discussion. Building across this corridor is a serious undertaking, and Hajar Range is the central obstacle. Crude oil doesn't flow uphill on its own. Each pipeline requires pumping stations on both sides of the range to push oil over the elevation changes. 10 pipelines would require more than 20 major pumping stations along the route, each one an industrial-scale facility. Adcop already crosses the Hajar using exactly this approach, so the engineering template is proven. Scaling to 10 pipelines multiplies every challenge but introduces no unknowns. Thermal management adds another layer. Ground temperatures in the UAE regularly exceed 122 degrees Fahrenheit. Steel expands in extreme heat, and crude oil breaks down at sustained high temperatures. Each line requires full-length fiber optic monitoring for real-time leak detection and continuous thermal tracking. The full footprint of 10 pipelines, with safety spacing between each line, service roads, fiber optic cable runs, pumping station facilities, and maintenance corridors, creates an industrial energy highway across the country. For construction context, the Dakota Access Pipeline in the United States, covering over 1,100 miles, was completed in roughly 10 months of active construction. A single pipeline here takes approximately 4 to 6 years from feasibility through commissioning, largely because routing through unstable mountain rock takes far longer than crossing flat ground. The full 10 pipeline system is estimated at 10 to 12 years total, but the phased approach means capacity builds continuously from the first pipeline forward. 10 pipelines concentrated in this corridor also create a concentrated target. The Defense Horizon Journal maps the threat picture in detail. The highest probability threat is cyber. Pipeline control systems, the software managing pressure, flow and valve operations, have been hacked before in multiple incidents worldwide. Iran's capabilities in this domain have grown substantially. Beyond cyber, the threat matrix extends to drone swarms, proxy attacks through allied groups in the Gulf, and the possibility of direct missile strikes. The 2019 attack on Saudi Aramco's Abqaiq and Quraysh facilities proved what a coordinated strike can do to critical energy infrastructure. That attack temporarily knocked roughly 5.7 million barrels per day offline without any warning. The March 2026 drone strikes on Fujairah's oil terminal during this conflict confirmed those same tactics are already being used against bypass infrastructure specifically. Defending the corridor requires multiple layers working together. Missile defense systems covering the pipeline route and Fujairah port, buried or hardened pipeline sections through the most exposed stretches, and redundant pumping stations so a strike on one node does not disable the full system. Sustained naval protection in the Gulf of Oman around the port itself is equally essential. The coalition forming around this infrastructure is broad. The United States has established naval presence throughout the region. China, Japan, and India all depend heavily on Gulf supply chains and have every reason to help protect it. In April 2026, the Atlantic Council published its Operation Overflow proposal, calling for rapid bypass construction as a strategic alternative to forcing vessels through a contested choke point. Building this corridor and defending it are the same project. The same corridor could also support something on a completely different scale. An inland maritime canal connecting Fujairah to Port Khalid in Sharjah would function as a Gulf equivalent of the Suez Canal, open to any vessel type, any cargo, full capacity in both directions. The channel would need to be approximately 650 to nearly 1,000 feet wide and around 65 to 82 feet deep to handle very large crude carriers, ships stretching over 1,000 feet in length. Total capacity would run between 20 and 25 million barrels per day. Cost comes in at $70 to $100 billion. Standard construction timeline 10 to 15 years, potentially compressible to 5 to 7 years under emergency mobilization. The excavation alone places this among the largest civil engineering undertakings in history. Moving roughly 2.5 to nearly 4 billion cubic yards of rock and sediment through the same mountain range goes beyond anything built in modern history. The expanded Suez Canal, involving roughly 45 miles of improvements, was completed in 1 year in 2015. The Panama Canal lock expansion took nearly 9 years, finishing in 2016. this canal would face terrain far more demanding than either. The canal is the long-term vision: total shipping freedom, full Hormuz replacement, any vessel class through a single waterway. The pipelines are the emergency answer: faster, cheaper, and the only option that delivers real capacity before any canal breaks ground. For decades, the threat alone was enough to reshape global shipping without ever being carried out. Every time tensions eased, the contingency plans went back into a drawer. Since February 28, 2026, those plans are no longer theoretical. The Defense Horizon Journal study completed the mathematics that had largely gone unfinished for 40 years. 10 pipelines, 116 kilometers, $40 to $60 billion. The system does not require every line to be complete before it starts working. The strait may eventually reopen through diplomacy or a negotiated resolution. What this crisis has demonstrated is that the global economy had built no real redundancy into its most critical energy route. Every year that passes without this infrastructure in the ground is another year the entire system depends on 21 miles of contested water staying open. The engineering template is proven, and the economic case was settled in the first week of the closure. 10 pipelines or 1 mega canal? Which would you build? Drop your answer in the comments below. Subscribe for more mega build stories.